Using a personal example, Todd Rose explains how tools and strategies can enhance working memory.
One of the things that's really important about thinking about the brain and learning from this dynamic perspective, from universal design for learning perspective, is that when you realize that there's no such thing as knowledge independent of context, there's no such thing as performance or ability independent of context, it actually opens up enormous possibilities for you to find levers in that context that will allow you to amplify your natural abilities. And it's been unfortunate because most of the static views of learning and of the brain that have really dominated psychology and even neuroscience up until the last few years have led us to believe that things like, say, executive functions are something that somehow reside inside the individual alone. So we end up creating disorders and then we spend, millions upon millions of dollars trying to find the cause of that disorder somewhere inside the person. And that's not to say that biological differences don't contribute to differences in something like executive functions, but it definitely means that they are not the cause of them. And so the good news is, let's take an example that for me personally, I would be on the very bottom end of whatever distribution you want for working memory, the ability to hold something in mind long enough to do anything about it. And without, left alone, if I believe that this is something that's internal to me, I'm in big trouble. And in fact, most of my childhood was just that. Either spent trying to figure out why I can't do this and, beating myself up over it, or giving into that helplessness and just saying, oh well, what can you do? I'm not a smart kid, But once you take this dynamic UDL perspective and you start to see that whatever my ability is resides in the interaction between me and my environment, then I can start to look to the environment and to tools in the environment that allow me to offload demands, and automate processes and amplify my natural ability. And this is the funny thing. That ability to use tools to amplify natural ability is uniquely human. And we do this in every other part of our lives, but somehow, again, we don't think of it when it comes to education and learning, but it's the same. So one example, my ability to organize myself. Most of my childhood and even into grad school, I was just brute force. I would make a lot of lists anywhere I could. I would lose those lists. I would write things on my hand in pen if they were really important. That was my strategy. I called it my organizational tattoos, actually. One day, as I was a grad student, almost ready to graduate, my stats professor saw me standing by the elevator, and I had ink all over my hands, and she said, "Todd, how old are you?" And I said, okay, well, I better figure something else out. But as I started thinking about working memory from a systems standpoint, from a UDL standpoint, and looking into the environment to say, what kind of tools could I use to offload some of these demands? And I started thinking I use a range of tools, but for example, I use a task manager list that allows me to do certain things like instantly capture an idea, any idea, no matter if it's really important or just a random thought, instantly into one centralized location. I have a version for that digitally, and I have a version for that in the analog world, paper pencil kind of thing. And what that simple step does means instead of trying to remember the 15 different places I may have left information, I only have to start learning how to remember 2. And once it's in there, I've created a system that includes email and calendar and task lists and other tools that can take that raw information and prioritize it and organize it. And now I don't have to be worried about what I'm supposed to do next. I just have to have a system that I trust. And the truth is, if you do that, once you realize that none of these abilities exist inside you, and once you get smart about how you use resources in your environment, it's not just that you're overcoming a deficit. You can be flat out better than anybody that tries it in their head by themselves. That's just the way it is. Tools are better than no tools every time. And I think we've missed a gigantic opportunity in education for introducing strategy teaching and tool use teaching as part of a fundamental aspect of the curriculum. That it's not enough to learn content, it's not enough for you to learn how your teacher writes a paper or how your teacher organizes their time. We need to allow lots of resources and tools and the time for individuals to figure out what works for them.